So today we are going to talk about aquatic plants. So aquatic plants are of three types. They are your floating plants, your fixed plants and your underwater plants. So aquatic plants are of three types, namely floating plants, your fixed plants and your underwater plants. So these are the three types of aquatic plants, and we will see each one individually. So the first, floating plants. These plants are spongy and filled with air. So we have the sponge that we use to erase the board. So floating plants are plants that are spongy and filled with air. This makes the plants very light and helps them float on water. So these floating plants are very light and hence it is able to float on water. Examples of your floating plant are your water hyacinth. So the examples of your floating plant are your water hyacinth, your water lettuce and your duckweed. So floating plants are plants that are spongy and are filled with air, and because it is very light, it is able to float on water. Examples are your water hyacinth, your water lettuce and your duckweed. The next aquatic plant is your fixed plants. These plants have roots that fix the plant in the mud at the bottom of the plant. So these fixed plants have roots that fix the plant in the mud at the bottom of the pond. Their stems are hollow and have air spaces. So the stems of the fixed plants are hollow and have air spaces. This helps the flowers and leaves to float on water. So because the stems are hollow and have air spaces, the leaves and flowers are able to float on water. The broad and flat leaves spread. So the broad and flat leaves spread on the surface of water to trap maximum sunlight. So the roots of the fixed plant are buried or fixed in the mud at the bottom of the plant, and the stem has hollow and air spaces. So the stems are hollow and have air spaces. So the flowers and leaves float on the top of the water. This is because they absorb maximum amount. So the broad and flat leaves spread over the surface of the water to trap maximum sunlight. The leaves have stomata only on its upper side. Normally we have seen that tiny openings or pores called stomata are situated on the underside of the leaves. But in the case of fixed aquatic plants, we find the stomata on its upper side. The leaves have a waxy coating to repel water. So the leaves of a fixed plant has a waxy coating in order to repel water. And the examples of your fixed plant are your lotus and water lily. The next aquatic plant is your underwater plants. They are completely submerged in water. So underwater plants are completely submerged in water, and the leaves and stems are thin and flexible. The stems of the underwater plants are very thin and flexible. This allows them to move with water currents. They have narrow, thin leaves with no stomata. So these plants, the underwater plants, do not have stomata. They breathe through their body surface. And examples of your underwater plants are your hydrilla and your tape grass. So the underwater plants are totally submerged in water, and the shape and structure of a plant is designed in such a way that it is able to survive in water, and it breathes. Their leaves have no stomata and they breathe through their body surface. So these are the different types of aquatic plants. That is your floating plants that float on water. The next is your fixed plants, wherein the roots are fixed into the mud and the leaves and the flowers and leaves float on water, and the leaves absorb maximum sunlight. The examples of your fixed plants are your lotus and water lily. And the next is your underwater plants that are submerged completely in water. Examples are your hydrilla and tape grass. So these are the different types of terrestrial plants and your aquatic plants. Terrestrial plants grow in plains, mountains, deserts, coastal areas and in swamps. And your aquatic plants are your fixed plants, your floating plants and your underwater plants.